Welcome, everybody, to the Sentinel Report. I am your host, Alex Newman. It is our first show of 2026. Welcome. We appreciate you so much. Thank you for tuning in. Folks, so much crazy stuff happening in the world. Maduro, the alleged president of Venezuela, now in jail in New York after being kidnapped or captured, depending on who you're listening to, and hauled back to the United States. Huge, huge news. We'll have a lot on this. Very few people have covered this issue in as much depth as it deserves. We'll try to make sense of it for you. We also have some excellent guests coming up, including the chief privacy officer and a lawmaker in Utah who have a very interesting proposal when it comes to digital ID to maybe harness some of those benefits without some of the incredibly Orwellian and totalitarian downfalls of it. So stay tuned for all that. But first, a word from the Word. This comes out of Romans chapter 12, verse 2. The Bible reads, "Do not conform to the pattern of this world, but be transformed by the renewing of your mind. Then you will be able to test and approve what God's will is, his good, pleasing, and perfect will." That could be a good motto for 2026, folks. We need to transform our mind. We need to harmonize our wills with God's will, and we need to do it with joy. And folks, that is really absolutely critical. So we have a lot of news for today. But before we get to the news, I do want to encourage you to check out our friends over at Classical Conversations. That's where my own children are getting their education. And I also have a new book out with Robert Borton's Woke and Weaponized. He is the CEO of Classical Conversations. So check all of that out, folks. You can actually pre-order the book at our website, libertysentinel.org. And we're already sending them out. So if you order it today, it should be in the mail within a week or so. I got my little team packing it here. But also, folks, if you have children in your life that you love, get them out of the government schools and get them a real education. Go to classicalconversations.com, classicalconversations.com. All right, folks, going to the news. We have the great Andrew Mueller joining us today as well, Chief of Operations for Liberty Sentinel Media. And I want to start just with a video that the White House released of this really dramatic incident, if you will, having to do with the dictator of Venezuela.
Venga por mí. Aquí lo espero en Miraflores. No se tarde en llegar, cobarde.
And now, if you don't know, now you know.
Sicker than your average. Pop a twist cabbage on instinct. Niggas don't think shit stink. Pink gators.
That was released by the White House, by the way. Yes, it was Nicolás Maduro, the dictator, calling Trump a coward, saying, "Come and get me, I'm waiting for you. What are you waiting so long for?" And obviously a lot of people unhappy, including the dictatorship. The vice president's very mad. We'll come back to her. But also the UN is mad, although here is Secretary of State Marco Rubio, who is obviously a key player in all this, has a background, family, having fled Latin American communism from Cuba. But here's what he said about what the UN says.
No, you're wrong in your question. Number one, Venezuela is a major source. And the reason why is the following. And I've seen a lot of this reporting, and it's fake reporting, and I'll tell you why. It says that somehow Venezuela is not involved in the drug trade because the UN says they're not involved in I don't care what the UN says. The UN doesn't know what they're talking about. Maduro is indicted by a grand jury in the Southern District of New York. That means the Southern District of New York presented the evidence to a grand jury, and a grand jury indicted him. And then a superseding indictment came out that was unsealed about a year and a half ago that specifically detailed Maduro's actions. So number one, let there be no doubt, Nicolás Maduro is an indicted drug trafficker in the United States, and he's a fugitive of American justice.
Yes. So I don't care what the UN says either. Do they have a point? I don't know. We'll see. But the fact that Maduro was helping to traffic drugs is indisputable. I've been documenting the Venezuelan government's drug trafficking for at least 15 years. They're using the drug proceeds not just to buy themselves fancy stuff, but to fund revolution across Latin America and across the United States. It's part of a broader leftist communist network with backing from the CCP and the Kremlin and the deep state in the United States. We'll get back to that. But first, here is the vice president of Venezuela, Delcy Rodriguez, who, along with her husband, by the way, these are leading members of this communist network in Latin America. And she says Maduro is still the president. She says the operation had a Zionist tinge to it, and that the goal is actually to re-enslave Venezuela and take away their freedom. Listen.
Gobiernos del mundo están
Governments
sencillamente
of the world
impactados
are
de
shocked
que sea la República Bolivariana de
that the
Venezuela
Bolivarian
víctima
Republic of
y
Venezuela has been the
objeto
victim
de
and
un
the target
ataque
of
esta
an attack of this
naturaleza
nature.
que tiene sin duda
And
alguna
it
tinte
undoubtedly has a
sionista.
Zionist tinge,
Es
she
realmente
says.
vergonzoso.
Shameful, she says, and the governments of the world are very mad. Now, I don't know about the Zionist tinge, but it's very funny that she's talking about re-enslaving Venezuela as if they were free, and now they're losing their freedoms. I'll tell you what, I'm from Miami. We got a lot of the Venezuelan diaspora in Miami, and there were massive celebrations all across Miami. The Venezuelan diaspora all around the world was celebrating this. Whether it was a good idea or not, I don't know. But I can tell you, Venezuelans, many of them were very, very pleased, at least the ones who weren't grifting and mooching off of this brutal regime. One really interesting thing worth mentioning is that Nathan Rothschild congratulated Trump on this operation in Venezuela. If you're watching us, you can see his tweet here. He says, "Well done, Donald J. Trump. Venezuela libre." The Rothschilds are some bad, bad people. A very, very powerful banking dynasty. And when they're congratulating you, you got to wonder what's going on. But Thomas Massie, congressman from Kentucky, who is in Trump's crosshairs right now, he is very upset. Here's what he had to say.
If it were about drugs, we'd bomb Mexico or China or Colombia, and the president would not have pardoned Juan Orlando Hernandez. This is about oil and regime change.
Well, I disagree with the congressman from Kentucky. I don't think it's about oil. America has more oil than it knows what to do with. We've got oil coming out of our ears. The reason we don't have access to it is because the government has forbidden it, although Trump seems to be changing that. So I don't think this is about oil. That's my opinion. Regime change, clearly, right? They took out the dictator, and we'll see what comes next. Unfortunately, Trump said now we're going to be running it. I don't even know what that means. And some bad signs, too, with Lindsey Graham. Here's what he said on Air Force One.
Could have done it. And as to this commander-in-chief, he did something people talked about doing. You just wait for Cuba. Cuba is a communist dictatorship that's killed priests and nuns. They've preyed on their own people. Their days are numbered. We're going to wake up one day, I hope in 26, in our backyard, we're going to have allies in these countries doing business with America, not narco-terrorist dictators killing Americans. This is a big frigging day.
Again, when Lindsey Graham is on your side, you got to wonder. Lindsey Graham is a neoconservative warmonger who never saw a war he didn't want to send your children to go die in. Now, it's possible that, like a broken clock, he could be right. And nobody has been more hostile to the Cuban dictatorship than me and the good anti-communist Cubans down in Miami. But I would rather go after the people who put the communist dictatorship in power rather than a foreign nation. And they're actually pretty easy to find. The Council on Foreign Relations played a huge role. New York Slimes played a huge role. State Department played a huge role in bringing this barbaric regime to power. So why aren't we seeing these people being targeted, right? General Michael Flynn and I just wrote an article, Justice for Russiagate. It's in the new issue of the New American Magazine. There's a whole list of people who've been betraying our country, committing crimes against the American people. It'd be easier to get them than a foreign government leader. So, maybe we look at them first. I don't know. Now, Graham also wants to make Iran great again. Here's what he had to say on Fox.
So I pray and hope that 2026 will be the year that we make Iran great again.
I'd like Iran to be great again, too, very much so. But with $200 trillion in unfunded liabilities and our military already stretched to the brink and real enemies, domestic and foreign, lining up at our gates, can we really do it? I don't know. We'll see. But Lindsey Graham, again, never saw a war he didn't want to send your kids to go die in. Now, Trump had some stuff to say about Cuba as well. Here's what he said.
Cuba is ready to fall.
Yes.
Cuba looks like it's ready to fall. I don't know if they're going to hold out. But Cuba now has no income. They got all of their income from Venezuela, from the Venezuelan oil. They're not getting any of it. And Cuba literally is ready to fall. And you have a lot of great Cuban Americans that are going to be very happy about this.
Are you considering U.S. action in Cuba?
We're not. I think it's just going to fall. I don't think we need any action. It looks like it's going down. It's going down for the count. You ever watch a fight?
Folks, I'm working on a big article about this right now. Venezuela really should be seen as a colony of Cuba. At least it was until a few days ago. The Maduro and prior to that, the Hugo Chavez dictatorship was basically a wholly owned subsidiary of the Cuban regime, which of course was a puppet of the Soviet Union, which of course was brought into power by the mega bankers on Wall Street, as documented by the great historian Anthony Sutton in Wall Street and the Bolshevik Revolution. So it's like the Russian dolls, right? You take off one, there's another one, and you take off one, there's another one. I think that's what we're dealing with here. And I would love to see the Cuban dictatorship fall. Be very, very nice. Colombia, also now in the crosshairs. Here's what Trump had to say.
Colombia is very sick, too, run by a sick man who likes making cocaine and selling it to the United States. And he's not going to be doing it very long, let me tell you.
What does that mean? He's not going to be doing it very long.
He's not doing it very long. He has cocaine mills and cocaine factories. He's not going to be doing it very long.
So there will be an operation by the U.S. and
it sounds good to me.
Secretary Rubio mentioned.
You know why? Because they kill a lot of people.
Now, to understand Trump's comments about Colombia, you need to know the background. Unfortunately, I was one of the only people in the United States media to be talking about this, but the regime in Colombia of Gustavo Petro and the FARC was actually brought to power by Barack Obama and George Soros and the communist Cuban dictatorship. I did a lot of reporting on this in the New American. I encourage you to read it. U.S. taxpayers fund takeover of Colombia by Marxist terrorists. That was one of the later ones. George Soros deeply involved in this. And folks, it is a huge problem. If you remember, we reported this on the show. Almost nobody in America talked about it. This Gustavo Petro, the president of Colombia, was on American soil in September with a bullhorn telling American soldiers to disobey President Trump, their commander-in-chief, and stand with humanity. They're getting ready for a color revolution in this country. And I, for one, hope that Trump is getting out ahead of them. We will see what happens. Now, Trump also says Mexico is in need of some house cleaning. Here's what he said.
By the way, you have to do something with Mexico. Mexico has to get their act together because they're pouring through Mexico, and we're going to have to do something. We'd love Mexico to do it. They're capable of doing it. But unfortunately, the cartels are very strong in Mexico.
I remember one time you actually, speaking of Mexico, I asked you about Claudia Sheinbaum, and you told me at one point you had offered to send U.S. troops into Mexico to combat drug trafficking there. Is that something you would
I like
to her
Claudia.
about?
I think she's a terrific person. I would say every single time I talk to her, I offered to send troops.
And she's just not willing?
She's concerned. She's a little afraid.
Yeah, troops in Mexico. We've seen that before, haven't we? Now, Trump says this is all about peace on Earth. Here he goes.
It's about peace on Earth.
How is it peace on Earth?
Peace on Earth. We got to have peace. It's our hemisphere. The Monroe Doctrine was very important when it was done, and other presidents, a lot of them, they lost sight of it. I didn't. I didn't lose sight. But it really is, it's peace on Earth.
And yes, the Monroe Doctrine, he calls it the Don Roe Doctrine. But part of this, and this is being expounded by thinkers like Marvin Yarvin, whatever his name is, the thinker. He's been saying that we ought to give Eurasia to the Russians, East Asia to the Chicoms, and we can focus here on the Western Hemisphere. So we'll discuss the wisdom or lack thereof of that policy on a future episode. But Trump is also really serious, it seems like, about Greenland. Here's what he had to say on this.
I will say this about Greenland. We need Greenland from a national security situation. It's so strategic. Right now, Greenland is covered with Russian and Chinese ships all over the place. We need Greenland from the standpoint of national security. And Denmark is not going to be able to do it, I can tell you. You know what Denmark did recently to boost up security in Greenland? They added one more dog sled. It's true. They thought that was a great move.
One more dog sled. All right, folks. And Andrew, I know you've been tracking Minnesota very carefully. Before we go to break, please tell us what's going on.
Yeah, Alex, this is absolutely crazy. Of course, Tim Walz actually dropped out of the campaign today. He was running for re-election to be governor of Minnesota. And really, we have Nick Shirley to thank for this. And we'll get into Nick Shirley in a minute. But Tim Walz released a statement on X, which is 4 pages long, a whole bunch of gobbledygook. And then he did a press conference immediately after releasing the statement where he read the statement word for word. And then he didn't even take any questions. But in the statement, he says, that Donald Trump and his allies in Washington want to make our state a colder and meaner place. He said, we've got Republicans here in the state legislature playing hide and seek with whistleblowers. This is my favorite part. We've got conspiracy theorist right-wing YouTubers, that's Nick Shirley, I guess, breaking into daycare centers and demanding access to our children. I'll come back to that in a second. We've got the president of the United States demonizing our Somalian neighbors and wrongfully confiscating childcare funding that Minnesotans rely on. It's disgusting and it's dangerous. He goes on, says a whole bunch of other garbage. He says, but as I reflect on this moment with my family and my team over the holidays, I came to the conclusion that I cannot give a political campaign my all. Every minute I spend defending my own political interests would be a minute I can't spend defending the people of Minnesota, blah, blah, blah. So I've decided to step out of the race and let others worry about the election while I focus on the work. Now, I think the Babylon Bee had a funny title here, Alex. They said, Tim Walz drops out of campaign to spend more time in prison. And I sure hope that is the case. But he obviously is on the run. He knows that this whole Nick Shirley, Minnesota daycare scandal that Nick Shirley did such a good job of exposing cooked his goose. Now, it's funny. Just 3 days ago, Nick Shirley continued his reporting on the Somali daycare fraud. And for those who didn't see it, right around Christmas, Nick Shirley, this young YouTuber, released this video on X. He exposed daycares in Minnesota, mainly run by Somalians, that were receiving millions of dollars from the state of Minnesota, that these daycares weren't even open, Shirley uncovered. They weren't even operating. They weren't even accepting children. The video got over 130 million views, and Tim Walz really had zero response to it other than, oh, this is just white supremacy at play. But Shirley continued exposing this fraud even up until just a few days ago. Here is Nick Shirley sharing how these daycares close once they're exposed and then reopen to continue the grift.
Chance on Polymarket right now that those people who helped defraud the government will be deported back to Somalia. But this daycare alone received over $2.45 million. So maybe if you want to become a millionaire here in the United States, you should open up a daycare center and receive government funding from a governor like Tim Walz here inside the state of Minnesota, because these people are making $2.45 million. And right now you have a BMW, Range Rover, BMW, and a van outside of this daycare center here in Minneapolis, Minnesota.
It's absolutely incredible. And it's just obvious that these daycares are a grift. And this is just the tip of the iceberg, I would imagine, that there is so much more that goes on that we don't even have an idea about. Now, typically, if somebody like Nick Shirley would go and do an expose like this, uncover some mass amount of fraud, make a huge political wave. I think that a video on X has never even reached 135 million views, especially not one that's 40 minutes long. So Shirley really did something unprecedented. And of course, the content he uncovered was remarkable. Now, typically, if somebody did something like this, I think the response from the left would be, well, let's just attack his character. Let's just attack him as an individual. Let's discredit him. Let's pull up some skeletons from his closet. But Nick Shirley on the Patrick Bet-David podcast said, you know what, Tim Walz, the Democrats, the radical left, there's nothing they can do because I don't really have any skeletons in my closet. Here is Nick saying, come and get me. There's no history.
I don't have any addictions. I don't have any vices. So what are these people going to get me for? They're done. I'm religious. I believe in God. I'm everything they hate.
I love that.
So what are they going to get me for? They can't get me for anything. Like, they're going to come after me for my personality or for a stunt I did in high school, maybe. That's maybe the best thing they could get me for, is for Nick Shirley being a young, reckless teenager, just like any other YouTube prankster. Go ahead. I don't care. Like, I have nothing to hide. Like, I literally have nothing to hide. So, like, I am going to become their worst enemy, and you're going to start seeing them using the slandering tactics, and it's just going to be comical for me because they can't get anything on me.
And by the way,
the way I've lived my life, and the way I do live my life is a matter-of-fact way. I have my morals. I have my principles. I surround myself with primarily just my family.
I just think that's incredible. I think that's a great example that, yeah, you know what? If you don't have premarital sex, if you don't do drugs, if you don't run around and act degenerate, your political enemies have nothing on you. And I think that's part of the reason why we're seeing the success of this video, the success of this expose, the success of getting Tim Walz to step down from running for re-election as governor of Minnesota, is that this young kid, 23 years old, makes a YouTube video with a pair of clip-on lapel mics and an iPhone. He gets over 130 million views, and they can't do anything about it. There's no skeletons in the closet because this young man has lived a fairly virtuous life from what we can tell. And they have no smears. They have no response to what he did other than just resigning or owning up to the mistake. This is, I think, a tremendous win. Now, we've got two more news stories that we can cover here in our final segment. The United Nations. Of course, if you're a viewer of this program, we have a rather particular disdain for them. But they spend approximately $100 million a year, it's been discovered, funding targeting Israel. They spend $100 million to target Israel. New report shows Israeli ambassador to the UN, Danny Danon, told the Jerusalem Post that the figure reflects a network of UN bodies, committees, and mechanisms structurally embedded in the organization's budget. The United Nations does indeed, he says, spend $100 million a year on reports, debates, special mechanisms, and communication activities dedicated almost exclusively to singling out Israel. The permanent mission to Israel said to the UN. This is the quote from Danny Danon. He said, "Today we actually showed that these are orchestrated campaigns, well-funded and well-established within the UN budget. These $100 million, which will be approved in the coming days in the new UN budget, are spent on activities against the government of Israel and against the IDF. Sometimes they do it directly," he said, such as through committees that address Palestinian issues. Many times it is disguised under different names and organizations, but the actual activities are pure propaganda against the state of Israel, close quote. Now, what you think about all of these issues aside, the United Nations should not be, as a international body of nations working together, actively undermining member governments. That shouldn't even be a thing, no matter what you think or feel about Israel, because I know that's a hot topic. The United Nations shouldn't be spending hundreds of millions of dollars undermining or going against a nation, a sovereign nation that's a member of the UN. Now, I would take that even further and say that the United Nations actively undermines the United States and our sovereignty through mass migration, through pushing World Health Organization edicts on our medical professionals and on our citizens, through indoctrinating our kids, through UNESCO, the United Nations Education institution. They also undermine our sovereignty through getting us involved in international politics and wars. It's just a really bad organization. It shouldn't exist. The United States needs to defund the UN and remove its headquarters from New York City. So there's another reason to believe that. And finally, our last story, stingless bees from the Amazon have been granted legal rights in the world's first case of animals getting rights. I guess I didn't know animals had rights. The planet's oldest bee species is a primary pollinator, of course, and they were under threat from deforestation and competition from killer bees. So the stingless bees will now have right to life, I guess. They're right-bearing subjects. According to Costanza Prieto, Latin America director at the Earth Law Center, who was a part of this campaign to give bees rights, he said, quote, "This ordinance marks a turning point in our relationship with nature. It makes stingless bees visible. It recognizes them as rights-bearing subjects and affirms their central role in preserving ecosystems." So in the United States of America and in the world at large, you can continue to murder your offspring through abortion. We can continue killing children. We can continue pushing vaccinations that harm people without informed consent. But bees in Latin America, they are dying due to deforestation and competition from killer bees. Therefore, we need to give them rights. We need to protect them. We need to have a rights-bearing relationship with them. This is absolutely nonsense, in my opinion. God has given inalienable rights to human beings, and those inalienable rights given by God to human beings are protected by the government, but the government doesn't give rights. And the government shouldn't be giving rights to animals when our rights are under attack. And I'm all for the environment. I'm all for protecting nature, but this just seems a little extreme. Well, we're going to do a great segment here in a couple minutes with some people from Utah, some representatives who are fighting against digital IDs. But I just want to give a quick shout out to Heritage Defense, our great sponsor. Did you know that 37% of children will be involved with child protective services by the time they are 18? And over 83% of these children were determined not to be victims. Homeschoolers are particularly at risk for child protective services targeting them. This can be a massive threat if you have disgruntled friends, family members, and others who disagree with your parenting decisions. So you can get great protection by visiting heritagedefense.org. They have a great team, 24/7 legal help that can be ready to aid your family and protect your home, your children, your potential rights, your parental rights, excuse me. You can have all this protection and more by visiting heritagedefense.org. Support the broadcast and get necessary protection for your family. We'll be right back on the other side with some great lawmakers from Utah.
Life's just better with VNI. There's purpose, there's passion, and there's a renewed sense of inspiration and optimism with every day. After all, we were founded on the power of possibility. Nearly a decade ago, a team of world-class scientists, formulators, and industry makers brought together biology, chemistry, and technology and created something unique and life-changing, while infusing a new sense of health and hope into the world. With every product comes an empowering opportunity to take charge of our destiny. One where we feel rejuvenated and energized, and everything else around us feels lighter, brighter, and full of promise. Let's live victoriously, together.
Welcome back to the Sentinel Report. Folks, we've talked a lot on this program about digital ID. It is a hot topic, not just in the United States, but around the world. Most governments around the world are actually either implementing digital ID or working on digital ID. It's coming at us like a freight train. And there are bad guys who want to use this digital ID to control and track everything you do. But in Utah, lawmakers and state officials are working on something different, something they say could harness the benefits of digital ID without the really creepy, Orwellian, totalitarian, draconian implications of all this. A couple months ago, I was in Dallas to speak at a legislators conference, the Pro Family Legislative Exchange Networks conference, and I had the opportunity to meet a lot of lawmakers. One of the ones I met was Representative Kristen Chevrier. She is a representative in Utah, and she told me about a proposal they were working on along with Christopher Bramwell. He is the Utah Chief Privacy Officer, also the Director of the Utah Office of Data Privacy. And it sounded really interesting. I thought we'd bring them on the program today to discuss. So, Chris Bramwell, let's start with you. Tell us about this initiative you guys are working on. You call it the State-Endorsed Digital Identity Framework. Let's start with what makes this different from some of the other digital ID schemes that are rolling out around the world.
Thanks for having me on today, Alex. And yes, it's called State-Endorsed Digital Identity. We call it SEDI for short. And our approach with SETI, we asked the question, what would digital identity look like if we actually wanted to create an American version of it that is meant to represent our values? And so with that, we kind of returned to first principles. And our approach with SETI is attempting to create a digital identity framework that starts with the first premise that identity is innate to an individual. So in America, your rights, you're born with them. They're not given to you by government. And identity is tied to your rights. So identity has to be something you control. Same with digital identity. The government's role is to protect it. Any digital identity has to be free from surveillance or tracking, Fourth Amendment protections. And then it has to be something that should strengthen the homes and something that parents are in charge of in relation when it comes to their children. And then I think most importantly, it's something that's not a means of control. When you know a lot about everybody, that data becomes valuable to impact behavior. So that became our fourth premise, was that it had to be something that you not only did not have tracking, you did not have profiling, but was controlled by the individual and could not be taken away or revoked by government. And so from that, that's where we got state-endorsed digital identity, was an initial framework that then we're now working through the technology review and design of to bring forth what we think would be an American version of identity that strengthens the country as opposed to sending it down the wrong path.
That is fascinating, and I want to come back to you in just a moment and get more. But for now, let's go to Representative Chevrier. You have been working on this for a long time. You are a lawmaker in Utah, and I understand from you and others that there are a lot of concerns in the Utah legislature about the possibilities of digital ID being used for nefarious purposes. And so you guys are, as I get it, trying to get out ahead of this before the bad stuff happens and come up with a rival proposal. Talk to us about what's going on in the legislature. I know you're working on bills that have to do with this. What are lawmakers thinking, and what do Americans need to know?
So what we're thinking is that, first of all, we started out with the mobile driver's license, and that was a pilot program that we have going here in the state, and we can see the dangers of that. And so what we've been trying to do is to both preserve the paper option, which we now have in code that the paper option has to be preserved. We're working on a constitutional amendment to that effect, that privacy belongs to you, your identity belongs to you, and that those things have to be preserved. But then we're also working on a different direction on the digital identity, where there's no capability for tracking. With the MDL, there is the capability of tracking your every move. As we've seen in all these other countries that are doing this. We've got the UK and Australia and China, and Spain is now rolling it out, and I'm sure you know of others. What we want to do is provide a different option so that we can focus our energies in a different direction and still address the tech issues that we know are moving forward with or without us. So we want to be able to address them in a positive way, where you own your own identity, you own your information, you share what you need to share or want to share, and there is no capability in the protocol itself for tracking. So we're trying to make it so that your identity is your own and protected, and then we can move forward in that direction instead of going further in the other direction, which I don't think any of us really want to go. So the general mood, I think, in the legislature is that this is an issue that we need to address sooner rather than later. And one of the things that we've been trying to do, we've been going in two directions. We've been talking with the grassroots. We've been bringing in advocates for privacy, both experts and grassroots advocates. And then we've also been working with policymakers. So one of the things that's super important right now is that we bring in elected officials and policymakers and discuss this issue and not allow it to be decided by bureaucrats.
Yeah. I mean, that's I think so critical. Right there is, why should unelected bureaucrats be deciding these things rather than elected representatives? But Chris, let's go back to you now. The federal government has been increasingly trying to exercise control over identity. Real ID, of course, was a major foray into that, trying to tell states what standards they needed for their driver's licenses, and then giving that little yellow star certification if it complied with all the federal decrees. Where does this Utah idea go as it relates to the federal government's efforts? Are you guys getting any guidance from the federal government? Are the feds involved in any way in this issue of digital IDs right now? And what does that mean for this idea in Utah?
I think one thing you need to realize, and it's important for your audience to realize, is digital ID is here. In the US, at the federal level, if you even want to file taxes on IRS.gov, you have to create a digital identity now. And that identity, when you read the terms and conditions, is owned by a private company and can be deleted at any point in time by that private company. You have MDL, you have Apple Digital ID is coming out, and you have login.gov. These are all different forms of digital identity of different flavors, but digital identity is here. Now, as we've been creating SETI, it's been very interesting conversations because nobody actually, from a policy perspective, talked to elected officials and said, what's the right American way to do it if we were going to do a comprehensive strategy? So all indications we're receiving, not just from states, but anybody we've talked to at the federal level or our federal delegations, has actually been a lot of interest. They didn't know that there were some valid policy discussions to have and possibly a better way to do it, where we don't have to just be beholden by what the world's creating, but an actual American way. So it's been positive discussions. And I think what also is very appealing at both the federal level and states is SETI is firmly saying identity is owned by the individual, but your identity actually first starts in the state anyway. It's the state that first endorses your identity via a birth certificate if you're a natural born American citizen. And your parents give you a name and endorse it, the state does. And that's what we're doing with SETI, is saying it's actually the state's role for US citizens to actually endorse your digital identity, and then you control it just like you would a birth certificate.
That's fascinating. And we're running up on the clock now, but Representative Chevrier, I want to ask you, I know you sent me the SETI paperwork. Where can people learn more about this? We've had a lot of interest in this. We've had lawmakers from across the country on the program talking about this. As you know, I spoke on this issue at the Legislators Summit in Dallas. How do people learn more about this? Say another state is interested in seeing what you guys are up to. Where do people find more?
So if they go, what I usually, it's on utah.gov. There's the state endorsed digital identity privacy Utah. But the easiest way that I've found is just to Google SETI Utah.
Okay,
And that
very
will
good.
pull up the website, and then you can look at it there.
Excellent. And Chris, when do you think something like this may be in place? I mean, how far are you guys from actually launching this, assuming it's going to happen?
Yeah, so we had we hosted a SETI event in October. We had 12 states attend. We are currently in the design phase. We hope to put forth the first draft of an implementation guide. That way you can get public critique, review, policy officials need to look at it. We really want feedback if we're trying to create an American version of digital identity. So that should be coming out end of January, beginning of February. And then we have already announced we are working with other states, and we'll be announcing the SETI consortium. And so we've realized a lot of states need help talking about this complex policy issue. They didn't realize some of the nuance of the discussion. So that's something that should be happening in February as well, as the announcement of the initial states working on that consortium to put forth a different model of identity to counter the different approaches out there.
That's fantastic. Well, I hope you guys will keep us updated. We'd love to keep our viewers and our listeners up to date on what you guys are working on. Fascinating, definitely different than what we're hearing and seeing in so many other places. But thank you both for joining us, Representative Kristen Chevrier and Christopher Bramwell, Chief Privacy Officer for the state of Utah. Thank you both very much for joining us today.
Thank you,
Alex.
All right, folks, stay with us. We're going to be right back after this quick break with more here on the Sentinel Report.
Life's just better with VNI. There's purpose, there's passion, and there's a renewed sense of inspiration and optimism with every day. After all, we were founded on the power of possibility. Nearly a decade ago, a team of world-class scientists, formulators, and industry makers brought together biology, chemistry, and technology and created something unique and life-changing, while infusing a new sense of health and hope into the world. With every product comes an empowering opportunity to take charge of our destiny. One where we feel rejuvenated and energized, and everything else around us feels lighter, brighter, and full of promise. Let's live victoriously, together.
Welcome back to the Sentinel Report. I'm your host, Alex Newman. Thanks for being with us. And folks, feminism. Oh, yeah. You know, we all kind of knew that some of the excesses were just really crazy. You know, the blue hair and the bra burning and the shrieking and the men are evil and we could do just fine without men. But now there's some literature actually suggesting that this is the case. There's a new study in the journal Sexuality and Culture. It's called Evolutionary Psychology and the Crisis of Empirical Rigor in Feminist Studies. Joining us now to discuss is the author of this paper. His name is Marc Defant. He's a professor of geology and geochemistry at the University of South Florida, and he does work in a lot of different fields. He was a recent guest on Joe Rogan, the Dinesh D'Souza podcast, so he's been all over, and he had some really interesting findings. Professor, thank you for joining us today. I really appreciate it.
Thanks for having me.
Of course. So tell us what you found in your paper here.
Well, you know, I work a great deal in biology now, and evolutionary psychology is part of that. And I'm saying that a lot of the characteristics, I'm not saying, the whole field is saying that a lot of our characteristics are left over from our evolution in hunter-gatherer society. And this goes counter to what the feminists are saying. The feminists for years, I mean decades, have been saying that culture forms the way we are. So masculinity and femininity is due to culture and has nothing to do with biology. I sometimes am amazed that they can say that and get away with it, but they do. I think they do that because it means that they can dismiss science, because they find that evolutionary psychology doesn't fit with their ideology. So I thought it was the time, maybe prescient, to write a paper on how they're ignoring all this rigorous scientific research. And, you know, in some cases, they even admit that it's good stuff, but they also say in their papers that, you know, we can't have this because it sets feminist ideology back. So their basis for saying almost anything is political rather than scientific, and that's a concern. And I get into different areas of where this is, not only evolutionary psychology, but there's a part of feminist studies called fat studies where they're trying to promote fat and being fat as healthy. It's called healthy at any size. And there's just an unbelievable amount of literature out there that says that if you're overweight, you're endangering your health. And so I got into that also a little bit. Just kind of bring the feminist back to reality a little bit, if you will.
Yeah. And one of the, correct me if I'm misunderstanding here, but one of the things that I understood from your research here is that these evolutionary processes have caused women to behave and think in a certain way. And that when these characteristics and behaviors are not applied toward the protection and the nurturing of children, they can be applied in ways that may be destructive in other areas. I've heard a number of people make this argument. What do you think about it?
Well, I think it's crazy. They want us to believe that men and women are the same, and they're attempting, in my opinion, to make men more feminine. We see this in the universities. There's a whole movement in psychology right now to sort of demasculinize men. Because, you know, this is toxic masculinity. Whereas I'm coming from a point of view where masculinity, testosterone makes us masculine to a greater extent or lesser extent. And we have like 10 times more testosterone than women. So it seems to me to be intuitively obvious from a scientific perspective that masculinity has something to do with biology, if not all to do with biology. And yet I see feminists trying to, I think, hurt men and boys. They have a guidelines by the American Psychological Association that actually says that men have been created this way by culture and we can change them. The biggest problem with men is their masculinity. And that I find quite disturbing.
Yeah. So we've only got a few minutes left, Professor, but I want to ask you about the big picture here. What happens if these issues are not addressed, if the feminist crazy train keeps driving down the rails and taking our society with it? And what do we need to do as a society to address this? I mean, is there a way to shut this off? I mean, like, you know, stopping the tax funding to it? How do we deal with this problem that you've identified here?
Well, I think we have to stop it in the universities. I think that would be the first place. In fact, part of my paper was stating that I think we need to get rid of all these political curriculums in the university, like feminist studies. African American studies might be another one. Queer studies is another one. We need they're all based on politics, and I believe they need to be in, you know, maybe think tanks or leftist think tanks rather than being part of the university. I mean, I think it's harming our look at the Psychological Association saying men shouldn't be so masculine and recommending to therapists that they try to change men from being masculine to something else. Is that really what we want? I see him doing this on the campus. It's called the Great Feminization. Several women have published papers on how they think that wokeism is due to women getting to be in higher numbers in the universities, in law, and in the medical fields. And so we're seeing the impact of not only women being there, but women with this ideology. And I think this has to be combated. I'm very concerned about it, and that's why I wrote this paper.
Yeah. And so what happens if they continue? I mean, let's say that they keep getting tax funding, they keep brainwashing people. I mean, we see it all the way down at the kindergarten level now. These ideas have permeated education and media, and as you said, law and everything. What happens if this continues? Is civilization at risk? I mean, is family at risk? Where does this lead?
Well, I don't know. One of the things that feminists seem to be promoting is not getting married. So, yeah, I think that our society could certainly be impacted by this. They're trying to discourage many women from having families and raising children, and I think we're already having problems with the numbers. Also, when we get into this, kind of ideology, it's basically wokeism. And, how many people want the craziness of wokeism? I mean, it just seems nonsensical to me, having women, men participating in women's sports, or women tend to not like freedom of speech. So we have the curving of freedom of speech in universities, which used to be, one of the major aspects of Western culture. And there are many other things that are being impacted by having this kind of culture. So if we don't get a hold of it, and I think Trump's trying to, and I think doing a pretty good job of it so far, God knows what would have happened if Harris would have been elected. So I'm hoping that he will continue to cut back the power. Heck, the National Science Foundation and National Institute of Health, the major science funding groups, they were funding crazy, giving millions of dollars away to social construction work, trying to get women back into computer science. Or yes, there is a discrepancy, but we find that women don't want to go into these fields. So why are we pushing them? Men don't want to become nurses. Why are we trying to push men into nursing? So yes, we got to get a hold of this, I think.
Yeah, fascinating. I may not agree with everything in Darwinian evolution, but natural selection. I mean, maybe they're just selecting themselves out of the gene pool, right? We're going to reject family, reject marriage, no babies. All right, well, see you later.
I think that's a good point. It's really good. We are finding that women have selected men to be the way we are. So, they're complaining about the way we are, but they selected men to be, bring home the bacon, to be protectors of the family, to go out and bring down some pretty big wild animals and become great hunters. And now we're seeing that in our society, and now they're saying, well, we don't really want this anymore. So,
well, this is fascinating, Professor Marc Defant.
Well,
I wish we had more time. I
do
appreciate you coming on. University of South Florida, folks. The research, you can read this for yourself. It's in the journal Sexuality and Culture. It's called Evolutionary Psychology and the Crisis of Empirical Rigor in Feminist Studies. Professor, thank you very much for joining us.
Thank
and I
you
hope
for
we talk
having
to you
me.
again. Absolutely.
All right.
Thank you, sir. And folks, stay with us. We're going to be right back with an incredible doctor, Dr. Torsten Trey. He is leading the charge against the forced organ harvesting happening in China. Stay tuned. We'll be right back.
In 1776, a nation was born, forged in the crucible of revolution. Brave men and women stood together fighting for freedom, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. Throughout history, the spirit of patriotism has prevailed. The battles may have changed, but the values remain the same. Today, in 2024, we find ourselves at a pivotal moment where the call for unity, freedom, and a better future echoes louder than ever. Introducing Patriot Mobile, the wireless carrier that stands with you. We are committed to supporting the values that make our nation great. With affordable plans and reliable nationwide coverage, Patriot Mobile is not just a wireless service. It's a call to action for those who believe in the American dream. Because this year is not just any year, it's the most important year since our nation's founding. Choose a wireless carrier that shares your values. Choose Patriot Mobile. For free activation, use promo code Newman.
Welcome back to the Sentinel Report. Alex Newman, your host here. Folks, there is a major crisis in communist China. In fact, there's a lot of them, but one that is near and dear to my heart, one that I've been writing about for over 15 years now because it's so monstrous, is the forced organ harvesting. I mean, they're literally taking dissidents, people who don't agree with the murderous regime, and they're strapping them to tables while they're alive and cutting their organs out. It sounds like some really bad science fiction, but it's true. It's real. It's happening. It's been happening, and it continues to happen. Joining us to discuss this and more today is Dr. Torsten Trey. He's the founder and executive director of Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting, DAFO. You can find him at dafoh.org. Dr. Trey, thank you very much for joining us today. And let's just start with the basics. I think this is going to be news for a lot of our audience. Are the communist Chinese really harvesting organs from prisoners?
Yes, well, thanks for having me. It's true, and it's what you said is also true. That it sounds like a science fiction, and that's how it began. Actually, in 2006 we had like whistleblowers from China who brought for the first time up the fact that dissidents, especially Falun Gong practitioners, were subject to forced organ harvesting. There was a journalist, then there was a nurse, and then there was an anonymous military doctor who wrote a letter. So that's how it started. And the first reaction from me and from others was, that cannot be true. That's not real. That's beyond what medical practice would stand for. So we continued, and then we found more and more evidence, and doctors were saying, yeah, actually, we have Falun Gong practitioners as organ source. And it went on and on. We collected piece after piece of evidence over many years. You can imagine it's like very difficult to get like information from China to collect the data. And we did this over years, and there were different groups. And for example, the wait times. And here in the US, it takes 5 years to wait for a kidney. In China, it takes 2 weeks. Or if you pay $10,000 extra, only 2 days. That's what a nurse said into a camera. Or that's about the waiting time. And then when they say we have like now we have an organ donor program since 2015, everything is solved. We don't do that anymore. But the point is that they, according to their numbers, they have produced like 100 times more organs from their small donor pool than in any other country. So it's basically a pretext. It's a deception. So with all what we know, it is happening in China. China has a large pool of of prisoners of conscience. They take blood tests, they do X-ray, ultrasound, and then they categorize the data into archives. So when a patient comes and says, I need a kidney, a liver, it just takes 5 minutes to go through the archive and to find prisoner X, Y, Z in this cell, and the next day the prisoner might end up in an operating room and they take out the organs. And this is so gruesome, so abominable, so unimaginable. It's that exactly that is the best shield or layer that they pretend it doesn't exist, but it does exist.
Yeah, it's just horrific. I wonder, Dr. Trey, why are more people not talking about this? I mean, I was in Israel maybe 12 years ago, and they had a special committee hearing that I attended, and so they were talking about it a little bit there, and I've heard the U.S. Congress has been brought up a few times, but why is it not common knowledge that one of the most powerful governments in the world is involved in these kinds of abuses?
Well, you can imagine what I just said. Forced organ harvesting is so gruesome that if this would become public, it would outrage the whole world, as the student massacre in 1989 did. The world saw it on camera and they reacted with outrage, and China suffered for about 10 years economically. So now they have learned, and they said we have to take this like make it invisible and pretend it doesn't happen. And so what they do is they have a strong influence on our news media. So you will barely see any news media here in the US that actually will mention it, not, just mention it, let alone having a series. There's, to my knowledge, mainly only the Epoch Times that reports about it, because the others might be compromised. I'm not sure, but they are, what I hear is China spends billions of dollars to have the influence on the news media. And then you might, you know that China sends a lot of students to medical schools, to our hospitals, and have interaction. Hospitals in the US have interactions with Chinese hospitals. So there is a lot of influence that tries to stop any kind of discussion at the very root of it. And we are basically losing this battle, this ethical battle, this battle of medical ethics. We are losing this battle to China. And China is, by doing this, is basically influencing, eroding our medical system. And that's why it's important that the politicians act on it, because news media and part of the medical community might already be compromised. And one way to stop it is, for example, right now there's a bill in the Senate, Senate Bill 817. This bill tries to stop the influence of China in our world, and here in the US, to basically make people go to China and become complicit in a murder, because that's what happens. If in China, transplant works like on demand. If a patient goes to China for a kidney, for a liver, whatever transplant, they match the recipient's blood type and tissue factors with a dissident in the detention camps, and then the request of the patient is basically triggering the murder, the killing of the organ donor. So our patients might not know that they are becoming complicit in a murder. And this is something where at the beginning you said this is only happening in China. It's actually not only happening in China. China is using its network to pull other countries into this nefarious practice. So it really requires a global awareness and then action to stop it.
Yeah, I couldn't agree with you more. And your organization, Doctors Against Forced Organ Harvesting, is leading that charge. Folks, in 2019, they received the Mother Teresa Award for Social Justice. In 2016, 17, and 2024, nominated for the Nobel Peace Prize. Doing a lot of really good work. We've got less than a minute left, Dr. Trey, but people can go to your website, obviously, dafoh.org. How else can people get involved?
Well, we are also on Twitter. It's a little different name, MDS Against FOH. That's our handle. And on our website, we have a link for a petition. People can sign on a petition. But what is most important is you can help us, you can take action. Go to your senator, call your senator officer, actually the two senators of your state here in the US, and ask them to take action and to support this Senate Bill 817. This is right now the most important step where we in the US can basically take back control over our medical system.
Yeah, and it is so essential, folks. We've got to deal with this. These abuses are unimaginably horrific. Nobody wants to think about it even, but we must. These are innocent human beings who are being abused in the most grotesque fashion imaginable. Dr. Torsten Trey, thank you very much for joining us today. Thank you for your heroic efforts here. I hope we can talk to you again very soon.
Thank you.
Thank you so much. And that's all we have time for today, ladies and gentlemen. Thank you very much for joining us here on the Sentinel Report. We really appreciate all that you do. Happy 2026, and God willing, we shall talk to you again soon. Till then, thanks for watching. Thanks for listening. God bless you all.